do it in real time, whatever you want to do. RB, what's up, man? It's been a while. How are you?
I know, Richard. I'm good. You doing all right? Fresh back from Omaha, trophy in hand. Everything good?
Yeah, they have not allowed me to hold the trophy. I did take a picture of it. I didn't even put myself in it, which was probably a mistake, but I did take a picture of it in Mike Bianco's office before I visited with him yesterday. But, yeah, what a fun experience. I actually am curious. So we know that college baseball is not as big a deal in the state of Alabama where you are as it is in Mississippi. But Auburn got there this year. They got to the College World Series. They've gotten there 2 out of the last 3 years. We've talked about growth of college baseball. Do you see college baseball growing where you are? Is the interest level ticking up? Are people caring more than maybe they have in the past?
I mean, people cared when Auburn made the postseason. There was very little, I think, buy-in during the season. I don't know what their average attendance was. I'm just judging on, do people call our show? Do people want us talking about it? Do people demand we interviewed Butch Thompson? And the answer to all those is no until, Auburn had won that regional and was going to Corvallis. And Alabama's just, they've struggled to latch on. I think Auburn getting better. I'm a believer that, a rising tide lifts all ships. I think I think Auburn made Alabama go out and do something like hire Nick Saban, and then Nick Saban's success has made Auburn, at least try to get better. So, I think if Auburn continues to improve look, they've been to 3 of the last 4 College World Series, or 2 of the last 3, College World Series, 3 out of 4 Super Regionals. So I think if they continue to do that, the pressure will be on Alabama to do whatever it takes to get better. So I think eventually it will get there. I don't know that it will ever be to the level of the state of Mississippi where, you're winning it back-to-back years. I don't know that the state of Alabama is going to be there anytime soon.
It is fascinating. The College World Series viewership numbers were up pretty significantly year over year, and I think the most since 2018. It was a fun scene, and it was something that people in your state have experienced a lot, right? With national championships, primarily in football, and that hasn't happened a lot. But to see it happen in 2 years, in consecutive years in the state of Mississippi, has certainly meant a lot where we are. So the news of the day is pretty darn big, right? With Southern Cal and UCLA announcing their intentions, or I guess not officially announcing, but it being reported that they are leaving the Pac-12. They're headed to the Big Ten. We try to make things as local as we can. Do you look at this and see that it means anything for the SEC?
Well, I think you can't look at this and not think that we are, I think, on a trajectory towards probably 4 super conferences. And I think if you got 4 super conferences, it probably means the SEC is going to add some teams. So I think, the trickle-down effect, this is part of the trickle-down effect from the SEC adding Oklahoma and Texas. And then I think, now that USC and UCLA are going to the Big Ten, I don't think Greg Sankey's just going to sit around and say, no, we got enough. We got everybody we want. I think if he can find a part that he thinks makes the SEC that much better, why not take them, right? If it's Clemson and Florida State, if it's Duke and North Carolina, if it's, maybe some of the Big 12 teams that they add, Baylor and Oklahoma State, for instance, whoever it would be that they think can make them better, why not keep adding? Because I think eventually you're going to do it anyway. That's my gut, is that these conference commissioners think eventually we're going to add teams anyway. Let's get them while we got the pick of the litter, right? If you're the Big Ten, let's go get USC and UCLA while they're still available. And if you're the SEC, who do you target next? Thinking, we may end up with 20 teams. So let's add them while we can pick them, and we're not just stuck with them at the end.
So there are a couple of things that you say that stand out to me. One, 4 super conferences. Are there enough teams left that we can fill out 4 super conferences and it makes sense?
Well, everybody's going to have their Vandy's and Dukes in Kansas, right? It's not going to be, all Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia. It's not going to be that. So, you're going to have some bottom feeders, but I think you're going to have some balance, and, you're going to have to be able to build out schedules. There's going to have to be some attention, I think, paid to geography and region and things like that. I have always felt like we are moving towards, 60 or 70 teams breaking away and doing their own thing. And the group of 5 teams basically left behind in their own division. So you might have Division II, FCS, the group of 5, and then, what we call the Power 5. I've always felt like they'll break away and do their own thing anyway. And in my opinion, we got a step closer to that today.
So on that front, I mean, where we live, that's a conversation that heavily includes Southern Miss. Where you are, that's a conversation that includes UAB, it includes Troy,
Yep.
it includes South Alabama. There's been pushback from schools like that. No, we don't want to be separate. We want to be a part of playing for it all, although the idea of playing for it all is kind of like a fairy tale anyway. I would argue that could be a really good thing for those schools, and I think it would be consumer friendly as well. I think people would watch and pay attention and be excited for a championship at that level. It wouldn't feel like Division I versus 1AA or FCS,
Yeah.
FBS, maybe the way it does currently. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, I mean, for instance, I'll use UAB since you brought them up. They played BYU in the Walk-Ons Bowl this past December, and it was the biggest viewing audience. It was on main ABC, biggest viewing audience UAB's ever had. I mean, that's playing BYU in a bowl game. I mean, if you had that, and it was the biggest win for UAB ever, by the way. BYU was ranked 13th. If that was part of a playoff, I mean, would you get those types of TV ratings, for that playoff? I personally think you would. I mean, people are watching bowl games. That was a meaningless bowl game to somebody it meant something to UAB fans, BYU fans, people that had money on it, right? So, wouldn't that be the same thing with a playoff? If UAB and Southern Miss, UAB from the American, Southern Miss are playing in a playoff game, and it's not head-to-head with, an FBS playoff game, I think people would watch it. I think those same amounts of people would watch it.
I would argue that even more people would watch it because there's
Maybe
something
so.
that's at stake. I mean, it's not just, with no disrespect to the Walk-Ons Bowl, it's not the Walk-Ons Bowl. It's they're playing in a playoff setting for a trophy. And I think we see decent numbers for FCS playoff games when they're not head-to-head with other stuff. So maybe there's something to that. There was another piece of what you said a second ago that kind of popped out at me. I completely agree with you, and I think everybody does, that regionally and geographically, the idea of Clemson or Florida State or Miami or North Carolina or whomever makes a lot of sense. But it feels like, if I'm reading everything correctly, and I think I am, the ACC has absolutely painted itself into a corner with the television contract that it signed and the grant of rights agreement, and unless they expand that conference and change the makeup of the conference, those teams are stuck. I don't think they can get out for a Clemson or a Virginia to come join the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right about that. And now that said, I mean, look what Oklahoma and Texas are going to have to pay, in theory, to join the SEC. So I guess money, at some point solves all of this. Well,
but they only had a finite amount of time. Now, it was longer. When it was announced last year, there was, 4 years left. And they're waiting it out. I don't think we're going to see Texas and Oklahoma before 2025 because the cost was so prohibitive. They're going to have an exit fee, but that grant of rights and the television revenue piece goes away. They're locked in for 14 more years in the ACC on those numbers.
Yeah, that was one of those deals where, it felt like you were doing that for comfort. Okay, well, we've got our partner now for 14 more years, and the schools didn't really think it through and think, big picture, what does this mean? If indeed we are shifting conferences now. No, you're absolutely right. It seems like they took the comfort, they took the blanket, and then all of a sudden the SEC does their big deal. The Big Ten is about to do a massive deal. I mean, it's the whole thing behind this USC and UCLA thing. The Big Ten did not announce their rights on Memorial Day like everybody thought they were going to. We see why now, because they've added the LA market. I mean, those numbers are about to go up. They're about to have a massive rights deal. Yeah. And I saw speculation that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be $30 million per school above the next closest conference. Think about that. $30 million per school over the next closest conference. That's insane.
Yeah, and I think what you said is important to remember there. Not 30 million more than the next closest school. So 40, 50, 55 million plus 30 more on top of that. The numbers are just absolutely insane when we look at them. Let's football. We'll pull it in from the national landscape to the SEC as we get closer. Only a few weeks away now from SEC Media Days, and that's when the countdown really begins to the start of the season. Outside of Nick Saban's and Jimbo Fisher's kind of back and forth a few weeks ago. Kind of feels like it's been a fairly quiet offseason for Alabama. Now, I know they've added some pieces and they've cherry-picked in the transfer portal, but in terms of just stuff, has it been particularly low-key, or is it just because I don't live where you do?
No, I think you're right. I mean, there really hasn't been that much news coming out. They didn't change coordinators. You know, Pete Golding is back as defensive coordinator. Bill O'Brien back for another lap as the offensive coordinator. There wasn't a ton of, coaching turnover. You don't have a quarterback battle. You know, it's obviously Bryce Young's job. Like you said, you know, the addition of Jahmyr Gibbs and Eli Ricks and Jermaine Burton and a couple of other guys out of the transfer portal were about the only news. I mean, it has been very, very quiet. I mean, really, Auburn kind of dominated the offseason news when they tried to fire Brian Harsin. And other than, as you said, the dust up with Jimbo Fisher, it has been pretty quiet in this state.
No big secret here that Nick Saban recruits at a pretty high level. And more times than not, if he sets his sight on a target, they go and get that target. That did not happen with Arch Manning. What was the reaction? Was there even any surprise at the end that it was Texas or Georgia and not Alabama? Or when Alabama got the commitment at quarterback a few weeks ago, everybody kind of understood what had happened?
Yep. That's it. I think, Alabama fans realized when they took the commitment of Eli Holstein that it was over. And, now you've got the Alabama fans, and they may be right about this. I'm not saying they're wrong, that are like, I think he's better than Arch Manning. That's the guy we wanted anyway. But, hey, they could be right. I'm not saying they're wrong. Eli Holstein could set the world on fire. I mean, Nick Saban doesn't generally miss at quarterback, So I think they're very happy with it. It's actually a very good quarterback room behind Bryce Young. They got a kid named Ty Simpson out of Tennessee that is really, really good. People think a lot of him. The backup is really good. I think the depth of the quarterback room at Alabama is probably about as good as it has been recently. And then you add Holstein to the mix. Yeah, I think once he committed, I think Alabama fans knew it was over then. I think in their heart of hearts, they were just pulling against Georgia at that point. Let him go to Texas. Yeah. That's fine. You'll eventually have to face him, but don't let him go to Georgia.
You mentioned Ty Simpson's name. I've heard some people really, really high on him. But maybe the larger question here is, or it's an observation, I guess, how dramatically the quarterback position for Nick Saban at Alabama has changed in 8 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah.
It's gone from go be the game manager and don't mess it up. And I know sometimes that's a derogatory term, but you're going to run it more than you throw it. We're going to get some play action stuff too. That is a dynamic position that has led directly to wins for Alabama because of who they've had playing that spot.
So Lane Kiffin's first year as offensive coordinator, the quarterback was Blake Sims, a name I don't suspect a whole lot of people in Mississippi, remember.
Converted running back.
Converted running back to quarterback. You're right. And at the end of that season, Alabama went to the playoffs, lost to Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, and Ohio State went on to win the national championship. But at the end of that season, Blake Sims was Alabama's all-time season-leading, all-time passer, single season. So that shows you how dramatically it has changed, because since then, the quarterback position has gone off the charts, and it really started with Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, that's where it accelerated. Once you had Tua Tagovailoa, and I think Mac Jones' performance surprised everybody how good he was, and then Bryce Young is Alabama's first quarterback to ever win a Heisman. So he's taken it even to the next level.
When you look at the state of Mississippi, and you see that Mississippi State team with Mike Leach and Will Rogers returning and a bunch of pieces back on offense, they've got to prove some things to me on the offensive line for me to believe that they take the next step, whatever that next step is. And you look at Ole Miss with a new quarterback, whether it's Altmaier or Jackson Dart. What's your take from one state over, from 3 hours to the east?
So I trust Lane Kiffin implicitly with quarterbacks. I think he's an excellent quarterback coach. He's going to get the most out of his quarterback and out of his offense. That said, I just assumed it was Jackson Dart's job, and it has blown me away to see from the state of Mississippi that no, Luke Altmaier is right in this thing. I mean, this is going to go to fall camp. And part of that too, Richard, and you saw more Altmaier than I did, but the two main times I saw Altmaier play were when Corral went out injured against Auburn and Altmaier came in and wasn't great. And then in the Sugar Bowl when Altmaier came in and the offense, they didn't do a ton the rest of that game. Now, it was a good Baylor defense, obviously.
Yeah.
But so I just assumed you go get Jackson Dart for a reason, right? When it comes to state, and I'm not going to remember every game, but there's a middle part of that schedule that I think includes Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M, Auburn, and maybe Tennessee. Am I right about that? There's Arkansas. Arkansas.
The order of what you're talking about, it's games 5, 6, 7, and 8. A&M, Arkansas, at Kentucky, Alabama, and then they have an open date before they play Auburn and Georgia.
Okay, Auburn and Georgia. That's a brutal stretch. I mean,
yeah.
What's the I don't even know what the easiest. I guess Auburn maybe is the easiest game in there.
Probably so.
Yeah, and that's the team State beat last year, obviously. But Kentucky, I think, is going to be really good. People think a lot of Will Levis. So I like Leach. I like what Rodgers did last year. I think Rodgers will probably lead the league statistically in passing. But when I look at that stretch of schedule, I look at, if you let Alabama and Georgia play that section of schedule, it would be tough for them to go undefeated. So, I look at that schedule, and it is not favorable right there in the middle for State to have any sort of 10-win season or anything like that.
I don't know what your relationship is with Nick Saban. I don't get the impression that anybody gets really close to him. I know you have a cordial relationship with him, but based on observing him in his time as the head coach at Alabama, if on October 8th he has the opportunity to absolutely demoralize and humiliate Jimbo, will he do it? Because I've seen Nick Saban take his foot off the gas a lot through the years when it felt like they could win by 40 if they wanted to, but 27 was fine.
Yeah. I would say it would be against his nature. I mean, to answer your question, we've actually got a really good relationship with him. He very much likes my co-host, Jim Dunaway. They've done a lot of work together. He comes on our show, frequently. Frequently is an overstatement, 4 or 5 times a year, as much as he does anybody's show.
Yeah.
But that aside, that's really out of character for him. I mean, I've watched him this whole time at Alabama, and I can't really think of a time where I thought, boy, he is proving a point here. He's running the score up to prove a point.
I could argue 2016 and 2017 against Ole Miss might have been prove-a-point games. Following the wins in 14 and 15? Or you think they were just that much better and they couldn't help themselves but to score?
Yeah. I've got to be honest with you. You're pushing me to remember the exact details of that game. The one I was going to point out that I always thought was interesting, this is very early in his tenure, was the national championship game against Texas, Alabama's first national championship under Saban. They were late in the game, and Muschamp, if you'll remember, one of Saban's guys was the defensive coordinator, and they punched one in at the end. It could have easily been a run-out-the-clock situation, and it felt like there was a message there. But then from that point on, maybe you're right. Maybe there was some payback against Ole Miss. I don't know. But I just don't remember a time where I've thought, boy, and I'll give you a great example. Gene Chiswick's last game at Auburn, Richard, that was 42-0 at halftime, and that game ended 49-0. I mean, Alabama could have scored 200 if they wanted to in that game, and that's your in-state rival. And he 100% lifted in that one, and called off the Dogs. So I don't know. I would say it's outside of his nature. If ever he were going to, though, October 8th might be the time he would flush that strategy and just go ahead and score all you can.
So Ole Miss in 2014 won 23-17 in Oxford. And then you had the crazy game in Tuscaloosa the next year where they won 43-37. The 2016 game was a shootout in Oxford. It was 48-43. It was the next 2 years, so it was 17 and 18, 66-3 and 62-7.
Okay, maybe so. You could be right. I'd forgotten those scores were that lopsided. That 2016 game was wild, if you remember. What was it, like 24-3? Jalen Hurts making his first kind of hostile road start and was shaken. And then Alabama jumped way out in the lead. And then, Ole Miss just kept coming back. That was a wild game. I'd forgotten those 2 games got that out of hand. So maybe there was a message in those 2.
Yeah, and that's when it kind of started going downhill for Ole Miss because they had lost the Florida State game heartbreaker early that they had the big lead in and then had the lead against Alabama. And that season kind of went downhill from there. So it was the end of a lot of things that year in Oxford. Ryan, thanks so much.